Hello and welcome to our webcast, Product Lifecycle Management, the Key to Digital Transformation. My name is Mark Tabor, Vice President of PLM Marketing at PTC, and I'll be your moderator today. During this webcast, our presenters will discuss the Forrester Wave, Product Lifecycle Management for Discrete Manufacturers, the report, and the digital trends transforming the PLM market. Following the presentation, we'll open the floor up for questions from the audience. To submit your questions, simply enter them into the Q&A window. With us today is our guest presenter and author of the report, Nate Fleming, Analyst at Forrester Research, and Kevin Wrenn, Divisional General Manager of the PLM segment at PTC. And now I'd like to turn it over to Nate.
Thanks, Mark. As an analyst on the CIO team at Forrester Research, I cover software and services that enable the product organization, with a focus on PLM and some of the augmentative tools that enable and enhance product development. I also do research on the Internet of Things and digital twin and how those technology trends are impacting product development organizations. For those who aren't familiar, Forrester is a global research and advisory firm. We work with business and technology leaders to develop customer-obsessed strategies that drive growth. Forrester's unique insights are grounded in annual surveys of more than 675,000 consumers and business leaders worldwide, rigorous and objective research methodologies, and the shared wisdom of our innovative clients. Through proprietary research, data, custom consulting, and events, the Forrester experience is about a singular, powerful purpose: to challenge the thinking of our clients to help them lead change in their organizations. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about what motivates Forrester clients to implement and adopt PLM software solutions. There are a couple trends that I find really drive adoption and interest in PLM solutions from Forrester clients, whether that's an update to a solution or a new implementation. The first one, and definitely the biggest one, is around digital transformations. Digital transformations introduce a range of themes that relate directly to PLM, including using data insights to directly feed customer experiences and feed product designs, and also encouraging collaboration across the organization around product development and product design. Another interesting theme that I see in the market is around IoT, or the Internet of Things, and how the Internet of Things is making product development increasingly complex and driving a need for more robust PLM implementations. I think at the basis of digital transformations is something that Forrester calls the age of the customer. And the age of the customer is a 20-year business cycle in which the most successful enterprises will reinvent themselves to systematically understand and service increasingly powerful customers. And this is a symptom of a world where customers have increasing power and increasing ability to change who they choose to buy their products and services from, thus promoting companies to look at digital transformation initiatives to bring software more central to their strategies and their interactions with customers. This is some Forrester data from a 2016 or 2017 survey around adoption of digital transformation or digital transformation journeys. And what you see here is that quite a large percentage of decision makers at enterprise businesses are choosing to go on digital transformation initiatives. You'll see 56% are currently undergoing some level of digital transformation. In other cases, you'll see 15% have completed their digital transformation. So what I've seen in the market is that there's major software acquisition or software adoption trends that are fed by this desire to embark on digital transformation initiatives. Something that I think is important to emphasize, and I think relates to the digital transformation trend, is the size of the PLM market within the business process application market as a whole. PLM is actually the fourth largest enterprise application market with a $15 billion market share. There's a few markets like CRM and financial management that are ahead of that, but it actually holds a pretty large stake in the business process application market overall, and I think that's driven in part by the desire to embark on digital transformations that ultimately involve the product organization and require PLM implementations. So before I go into more detail on the format of the Forrester Wave, I want to talk about why our clients find it really valuable. First of all, I think it's sort of the role it plays within our research, being a vendor selection tool. Our clients, often technology stakeholders, really need help understanding and shortlisting vendors when they're trying to make a software selection tool, a software selection decision. And, the Wave can sort of help to guide them. It also helps clients get beyond just looking at, the marketing materials that vendors provide around their products into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty in terms of what they're really offering, what the customer experiences were. And that gets into the sort of the different types of data we use for these Forrester Waves. First of all, our legacy market knowledge. Second of all, data from our surveys or other surveys that we've conducted independently. We use data from vendor briefings for each vendor included in the Wave itself. And then finally, we use data from customer reference conversations that the vendor provided to really get a sense of, what the customer's experiences were using the software, implementing the software, updating the software, details like that. Another reason I think that clients really like the Wave is that they can sort of look at criteria piece by piece and decide what's important to them and really look at how vendors performed on those specific criteria to help them on a little bit more of a granular level, make those really valuable software sourcing decisions. So as a disclaimer, the graphics in the next few slides are illustrative only and aren't related to the topic of this Wave. The Forrester Wave is a graphic that illustrates Forrester's call on technology markets. It uses an open methodology to evaluate companies on 3 dimensions: their current offering, their strategy, and their market presence, providing a quick, true picture of the landscape. With a glance, clients can determine if a vendor is a leader, strong performer, contender, or challenger. Leaders have a strong, differentiated current offering and strategy, as evaluated by Forrester and validated by customers. Strong performers have competitive offerings and strategies compared to leaders and are likely to appear on many user shortlists. However, they're not as advanced as the leaders in current offering or strategy, and customer references aren't as strong as those of leaders. Contenders have current offerings that demonstrate strengths, but are within a narrower set of requirements than leaders and strong performers. Their strategies in general are also less advanced than leaders and strong performers. And then finally, challengers, while among the top tier of vendors in the space, lag behind in their current offering and strategy. So here you'll see that leaders are in the top right of the Wave. Strong performers are next. Contenders are moving towards the left, and challengers are the most left section of the Wave graphic. The Forrester Wave has transparent criteria and scoring, which allows our clients to understand why particular vendors are placed as either leaders, strong performers, contenders, or challengers. These scores and weightings determine where a vendor's bubble will be plotted on the Wave graphic. And again, this is an example of a Wave scorecard. This is a screenshot of the report, which gives a high level of the evaluation and every vendor included. It will also include all of the graphics, such as the matrix, which contains the scores and weightings, as well as the Wave evaluation graphic with the vendor's position. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about what some of the core technologies for discrete manufacturers are within PLM and how those are changing in the digital era. So as you can see, there's a high level of interest in PLM software today, both within manufacturing industries and also across all industries. So you'll see from some 2017 software survey data from Forrester that 57% of software decision makers are either implemented, expanding, or upgrading implementation of a PLM today. That's a little bit smaller across all industries, but still a significant number. So again, I think this displays the high level of interest that there is in PLM today that's driven by digital transformation initiatives that bring the product organization and the software that enables the product organization into the spotlight. So here are some of the legacy issues or barriers that digital transformation introduces that PLM seeks to solve or aid in solving. I think one core issue that companies encounter as they embark on digital transformations is they realize that their product data isn't consistent, especially not across the entire product lifecycle. They also realize that the product organization has been siloed. Oftentimes, engineers and designers don't collaborate with the rest of the organization the way they should. Also, the nature of PLM software means that it's often been closed due to security concerns or the realities of the vendor market, making it harder for stakeholders from across the organization to get the product data they need to drive value for their customers. I'm also seeing emerging expectations around data analytics and reporting capabilities around product data. And then finally, an interesting trend I've seen evolve over the last couple of years has been interest in cloud-deployed PLM. Especially across all industries where PLM is less core, cloud is an interesting option for potential PLM customers. But even within manufacturing, I'm starting to see increased interest in cloud-deployed PLM. And what I've seen over the last 12 to 18 months is really how PLM vendors are shifting their requirements to meet the needs of PLM customers and their evolving demands. So a common concern or barrier I heard from from Forrester clients that are PLM customers used to be around user experiences with PLM. The PLM wasn't necessarily intuitive, it was hard to use, and thus it didn't see adoption. This especially applies to business stakeholders. Oftentimes Forrester clients were disappointed with the collaboration capabilities that the PLM offered. And what all these issues led to was really less adoption of the PLM. And when you see less adoption of the PLM across an organization, you see that it ultimately drives less value, the data is less valuable, and it inhibits collaboration and sort of visibility between product development and the rest of the organization. I've also seen vendors work really hard to provide a single source of truth for product development data across the life cycle. So not just data within the design phase, but also in manufacturing and with the product out in the world. The ability to drive consistent data across those three stages is really key, and PLM vendors and PLM customers are making concerted efforts to enable those capabilities. Another interesting trend I've seen around PLM vendors is adoption of emerging technologies that relate to PLM either directly or indirectly. So I think PLM vendors that perform well are those that are able to look at the market, understand how it's shifting, and bring augmentative technologies either into their suite or create integrations that enable those technologies so that their customers are able to do the things they need to do to remain innovative and competitive in their markets. So now we're going to get into the structure of the Forrester Wave report itself. Again, the report was titled the Forrester Wave, Product Lifecycle Management for Discrete Manufacturers, and it looked at 7 vendors in the PLM field. So we had 3 core inclusion criteria for this report. If vendors didn't meet these criteria, they could not be included in the report. So first, a vendor needed to have a revenue that was over $100 million in 2016. They needed to have a strong base of discrete manufacturing clients using the PLM solution today. And they needed to come up in my conversations with Forrester clients who are discrete manufacturers around PLM shortlists, PLM vendor selection, and PLM updates. So now you'll see the assessment criteria that I use for this wave. Some of these criteria are more traditional and core to PLM offerings. Others are more forward-facing, touching on the emerging technology aspect that I mentioned earlier on. The strategy criteria are around product vision, partner ecosystem, and delivery model, focusing in on cloud delivery model and how that's evolving. And the market presence focused on the revenue of the product and the number of customers. So in terms of the current offering criteria, some of the core criteria were bill of material management, quality and compliance, supplier management, integration with manufacturing execution systems, simulation data management capabilities, role-based applications. And then some of the more forward-facing capabilities were around things like analytics capabilities, IoT platform, and integration with usage data, digital twin capabilities, adoption of mobile applications, integration and openness, and how agile and fast implementations and updates were for customers and how that experience was for customers. So here are the Forrester Wave PLM results. In the top right, you'll see the leaders. There were 3 leaders in this wave. Then you'll see the strong performers, the contenders, and the challengers. So now I'm going to talk about what types of capabilities and offerings contributed to a good performance in the wave. One of the really core things I found in talking to customer references for the PLM wave was around customer-centric client relationships. So PLM customers tended to have a better experience if they felt that the PLM vendor really valued their needs and took their needs and turned them into requirements or helped them in customization efforts. So some vendors really struggled because their services organizations or their implementation organizations were disconnected across geographies, or other customers felt that the PLM vendor didn't really care about the requirements that they asked for or didn't take those into consideration when they were updating PLM products. So that tended to hurt customers more, or PLM vendors more. PLM vendors that performed well had customers that really felt like the customer, or PLM vendors that performed well felt like the vendors really cared about their needs and showed that in their requirements. Another sort of core experience that I thought led to good scores in the wave was around implementation and update capabilities. So I looked for PLM implementations that were done in an agile manner, that were done quickly, that delivered business value incrementally, and then updates that were easy and seamless and happened on a regular cadence, at least once a year. Oftentimes in the past, updates were done over several years due to heavy customization of products. Another capability I looked at was around BOM management capabilities across the life cycle. What I found was customer references at successful vendors were aggressively adopting these capabilities or had them on their roadmap. And that means you have a consistent view of the product from design through to manufacturing and all the way to operation in the field. And that enables some really important things. If you think about how a product's designed, it's important that that is aligned with how the product's manufactured on the factory floor. And if you start to align the bill of materials between those two stages in the life cycle, you'll see higher quality products and products that meet the expectations of customers. Another key criteria that I looked at was engagement with non-traditional PLM stakeholders within the PLM. So that might be role-based apps, that might be modules or low-code capabilities that allow business users to create the capabilities that they need quickly to drive value quickly. That also means a really easy-to-use system that's easy for business users to understand. Finally, I looked at product vision. I found that vendors that performed well had a product vision that not only looked at the core needs of discrete manufacturers today, but did well to anticipate the needs of discrete manufacturers down the road and adopted technologies that would meet those needs. Key themes here are things like IoT platforms, digital twin capabilities, augmented reality capabilities, customers mentioning the usage of mobile applications frequently, whether on the factory floor or to do approvals on the go from their mobile phone. I also looked quite a bit at strategy and vision, and I found that PLM vendors were very differentiated here at times. Some were very focused on the needs of customers today. Some were very focused on the needs of very large discrete manufacturers. And I found that sometimes with a larger customer base of mid-sized, still enterprise manufacturers, their needs weren't being met. These systems are so complex that it was difficult to implement them and integrate them throughout the rest of the software application ecosystem. I also looked for adoption and embrace of emerging technologies, as I mentioned, and understanding of how those technologies would impact the product development organization. And then a really important thing here is sort of enabling cloud adoption when the client wishes to go in that direction. So I looked for vendors who are creating frameworks and encouraging customers to migrate to cloud, and we're making that an easy and seamless process. So now we've touched on some of the macro trends that we're differentiating in the PLM wave. And from here, we're going to jump into 6 specific offerings that customers said were driving innovation and differentiation from their competitors in the market. Those 6 offerings were around digitalization, IoT, role-based applications, digital twin, PLM in the cloud, and implementation, configuration, and integration capabilities. So first, digitalization. Really core to the digitalization theme within PLM is keeping consistent product data. What I found with Forrester clients who are product companies is that oftentimes they're manually managing their data using Excel or email, or they're using a legacy PLM that doesn't adequately provide the data management needs that they desire. So it's hard to input the data doesn't stay consistent, not all the stakeholders that need to interact with the PLM do that, and thus you have sort of incomplete data. And what I heard from customers during the Forrester Wave customer reference interviews is that there's a major push from the product development organization, but also the executives across the organization to keep that data more consistent so that you can get more value out of that data. And so some of the themes I heard from PLM customers were around, first of all, within the design phase, making sure that every stakeholder that needed to interact with the PLM was doing so, that the data stays consistent and clean. Another theme I heard was customers who were considering IoT initiatives or were embarking on IoT initiatives wanted to be able to extend that sort of bill of material data from the design phase all the way through to manufacturing and operations in the field so that they had full visibility on the exact, bill of materials and specifications of each product they had out in the field with their customers. And then finally, I think it's important to emphasize some of the business value that drives so that if you have a consistent connection between your PLM and your manufacturing execution system, then, assembly stakeholders on the factory floor are more able to, view that product data, have more context into how to assemble and put together these complex products. And also at times I'm starting to hear about augmented reality solutions that are through tablets that are feeding stakeholders on the factory floor with visual cues and visual tools in their moment of need to help with the assembly of products. And that ultimately leads to higher quality products that are more consistent with how they were designed. Now I'll hand it over to Kevin to give his perspective on this.
Thanks, Nate. We see a lot of the same things, which is a lot of people are trying to get together their product definition data these days. And from our perspective, we see the driver of that is that they're getting ready for the IoT. And so many of our customers are starting up digitalization initiatives to do just that. And so in those digitalization initiatives, we see a few things happening. The first thing is that, of course, they're trying to get their engineering data together. The second thing is they're trying to figure out how can they extend that engineering data into manufacturing through the manufacturing engineering department. And the third thing we see happening is them trying to extend that same digital data into the service department through service engineering. And then finally, we see these customers getting themselves ready to extend that data out into other systems in the enterprise like MES and ERP, and then ultimately get out to the equipment in the field through a machine cloud or directly to the machine. And we roll all of these things into this idea of digitalization initiatives that our customers are seeing, or let's say executing. And as a result, we're adjusting our offerings to better suit those environments. We're adjusting our service offerings to do the same. We're adjusting the way we deal with our partners to do the same, and ultimately trying to put ourselves in a position where we can help our customers through their digitalization initiatives with technology, with some advice, and with an eye to the future.
Thanks, Kevin. Next, I'm going to touch on IoT and how IoT is affecting Forrester clients' product organizations. So, there's a few different aspects of IoT that really impacts product companies, I think. The first is obviously that products become more complex. You don't only have to worry about the mechanical and the electronic capabilities of the product, but now you have the software dimension, which is so core and so foreign to so many legacy product companies. The other interesting shift is around how products are managed. Now, for traditional product companies, once the product's sold, it's in the customer's hands, and generally you're not hearing from that customer unless, regrettably, there's a recall or something along those lines. But now with software and software experiences embedded and augmented to the connected product, you have these ongoing relationships. So that's a really hard task, I think, for legacy product companies, and I hear sort of barriers around that all the time from my clients. So I think a PLM is a really valuable tool. They can sort of ease some of those growing pains that these product companies encounter. So first of all, IoT platforms, they're really enabling management of product usage data in the field. And I think there's a really important connection between PLM and IoT when you start to think about the capabilities or the opportunities within closed-loop product development. The opportunity to take product usage data from the field and feed that back into R&D and design so that engineers can understand how their products are being used, how their products are being interacted with, what features customers maybe are not understanding about a product in the field, how products are malfunctioning frequently, and they can take all that data and input that into the next version of the product so that, when they're designing that next version, they can meet some of those, sort of legacy issues that clients have had. Another way that clients that I talked to for the Wave were excited about IoT platforms was it brought sort of low-code opportunities to get value from IoT data. Another common theme or barrier we hear from clients experimenting with IoT is, they get this usage data, they get this sensor data, but it's difficult for them to find business value for that data. And I think IoT platforms start to offer opportunity to create custom applications quickly and easily that help clients in their specific ways they need to get value from that data. And then finally, another interesting theme I heard around IoT platforms that I didn't necessarily anticipate was clients were seeing them as a way to sort of aggregate data from across the organization, not just product usage data, but also data from other enterprise application systems, and sort of analyze that data within the IoT platform. And again, maybe that applies to a low-code application they want to design. But just finding ways beyond just product usage data to start to get value from data from across the enterprise and how it feeds into product development.
So, our perspective is that, in the world of IoT, you could make the case that IoT equals PLM and PLM equals IoT. I mean, if you think about it, what better reason to connect the product in the field than to lifecycle manage it? And if you believe that, what better company to lead IoT than a PLM company? So let me explain to you why we think that that's true. In product lifecycle, we see a couple of intertwined, let's say, 360-degree views. And what you see here on the slides is the one that I think normally, we all jump from, which is, hey, things start in engineering, They'll move through manufacturing, then to sales, out to be operated in the field, and into service. And therefore, now we can stay connected to that product. We can manage that entire product lifecycle. What we're seeing now at PTC, there's a second 360-degree loop that we think is important that starts to round out the concept of product lifecycle management in the capital letters, meaning throughout the entire lifecycle, which is, if you take an engineering perspective, you'd say, great, what do we need to think about from engineering? You know, as Nate mentioned, now we have this opportunity to get feedback on product failures or feedback on product usage, and we can use those things to change a product while it's in the customer's hands through a software update. You know, software then would be, let's say, the lifeblood of an evergreen product in that case. But there's all other kinds of data that we can use in an engineering context as well. So, of course, the data from the IoT, data from CAD, data from ERP, data from CRM, to see, you know, who owns the product, who's complaining about the product from a customer perspective, as well as we mentioned earlier from systems that are close to engineering like ERP and MES. And so we start to see this perspective that if you want to think about PLM in capital letters, engineering needs to think about you know, the core product structure as the organizing construct or their home context to bring data in from other systems and other places to make better decisions and better products. Likewise, if we take a PLM perspective from a manufacturing point of view, there's lots and lots of interesting data in the enterprise and coming from machines in the field that can inform people in manufacturing, whether that's in operations or in engineering, and they have their own 360-degree view at their particular life cycle that would help them manufacture higher quality products as they move along.
So another theme I heard from customers that really drove value within PLM implementations was around role-based applications. There are a few reasons for that. First of all, role-based applications represent PLM vendors that have a better understanding of the needs of their customers across different manufacturing industries and are creating sort of modules or pre-built applications that meet those needs. That cuts down on customization to the hard code, which means it's easier to update the software down the road. Another really interesting and I think evolving sort of aspect to role-based applications within PLM implementations is around engagement with business users. Role-based applications make it easier for business users to interact with the PLM, and the more individuals you have interacting with the PLM, the more value that system is going to drive. It's going to keep more consistent and more robust data around product development. And then finally, you know, you see some sort of easy ROI opportunities for PLM within role-based applications. So you see how role-based applications can accelerate time to market. If someone who needs to provide approvals on certain product designs is on the road, if they're traveling for business, if they're just on the train home from work, they can go on their mobile phone and you know, push through an approval that may be before they would have to be on the server and you know, at a workstation in the office to do so. I'm also hearing about interesting role-based applications on the factory floor, and those are often augmented reality based, where you know, stakeholders on the factory floor are able to get data in their time of need through a tablet that provides really sort of contextual, interesting additional data that assembly individuals can use to, you know, do a better and faster job on the factory floor.
Yeah, from our perspective, we see those things happening as well. And you know, just say a small anecdote. As we were talking to our customers about the future of PLM, we heard a very, very similar kind of perspective from many of our customers that said, listen, product data is getting very, very complicated. We put data into PLM to keep it organized. However, the only people that ever really use that data are the people that put it in. And for us, we took that as an important piece of feedback to start to think about PLM as a real enterprise application rather than one that engineers use to keep product configurations straight so that they can ultimately send things to other people. We started to think about PLM as, you know, an information source for anybody in the enterprise to start to draw from so that they can make their own decisions better for their own function. And so we started to think about, you know, what are the most important pieces of product information that should be made available to non-expert users of PLM. And that had us come up with our offering Navigate. And from that perspective, we started to say, okay, great. If we wanted to put other professionals inside of the enterprise in the position where they could have self-service information from a PLM system, what would that application look like from a role perspective, from a task perspective, and from a data perspective, so that someone from purchasing, for example, wouldn't have to call an engineer. They could go into the system directly through a pretty easy user interface, be able to get at up-to-date and trustworthy information, again, in a format that would make sense to them so they can make a better decision for their job. And so we think about it that way, role-specific, task-specific, in the context of the individual who needs the data, and then again in any format that they might want to see it in. So if a table happens to be the best way, great, they get a table. If 3D mock-up on the screen is the best way, that will be the way we deliver it. Ultimately, could it be delivered in AR and VR? We can deliver it that way. But always in this perspective of helping a role be able to do a job that has specific tasks, again, in the context of the way they see the world.
Another theme that emerged in the PLM wave was around digital twin. And again, this one's sort of linked to IoT. And I think, what I've seen with Forrester clients is, a couple of years ago, they were really asking about IoT. They were investigating IoT projects, but they weren't really necessarily sure about monetization. And what I'm seeing now at Forrester is that digital twin represents one of the sort of early opportunities for companies to take the sensors they've connected to products and start to actually create monetizable, business opportunities or go-to-market opportunities through the digital twin. I think a really key piece of the digital twin that's worth mentioning and that is, really vital is around how the digital twin accounts for mechanical, electrical, and software specifications within each asset. That touches back on IoT again in the sense that, if you're pushing software up to these products, digital twin provides a way for engineers and software developers to be aware of exactly what specifications each product has, so they know they're pushing the right firmware that isn't going to lead to some sort of malfunction or error with the product in the field. Another really important thing I think to emphasize around digital twin is how it's being defined in the market. And I'm actually just finishing up work on a report on this right now. I think different software vendors are using the term to meet their own needs, but I think there are really sort of three stages to digital twin as I see it. The first one is, very traditional and has existed for a long time, and that's the design twin. And that's basically, the ability to create 3D or 2D models of a product in the design phase, and also do simulation capabilities around those products to sort of drive innovation and testing before you go into prototyping. So that's the first stage of digital twin, and we've seen that for a long time. The second stage is around sort of what I call the process twin, and that's the ability to simulate the factory floor and understand how different products are going to be assembled on the factory floor. And using the process twin and systems like manufacturing execution systems, manufacturing companies are able to sort of really sort of cut down on the gap between design and manufacturing. And then finally, I think the really important and prominent twin that we're hearing about the most today is the service twin, and that's a virtual representation of a product based on usage data in the field. And again, that's the type of digital twin that started to drive new business opportunities and monetization efforts. Today, that's taking form in predictive maintenance, being able to, sense when a component within a product might fail based on, past usage data and based on machine learning, and, sending a technician to the field to fix that product with the right tools, with the right replacement components before it fails. Down the road, I see that, and I see this with some companies today, I see that evolving into as-a-service business models where companies are able to use digital twin to provide, machinery as a service rather than selling it to them in a one-off engagement.
From our perspective, we see much of the same, although I think we talk about it a little bit differently. To your point, Nate, I think every vendor's got their own point of view. I will give you ours. And so for us, we see the physical and digital world have converged, and we represent it through this yin and yang chart, which looks very, very similar to the PTC logo these days, although we won't show you the logo on this webcast. And from our perspective, whether you're going to use a digital twin in design or in manufacturing via process twin or in service, as Nate had mentioned, we're seeing that in order to have a real digital twin, you have to have the existence of at least two things. And that is some kind of a digital definition, and the second thing is some kind of physical experience. And let me take you through a little bit of how we see that, if you were to start from scratch. And so, as Nate had mentioned, the digital twin, gets born in design, in software, in mechanical hardware and electrical hardware. Ultimately you take that either through modern methods like additive manufacturing or through traditional methods, and you create a thing in the physical environment. And I think all of us would say that this is the world of PLM that we've seen for years and years and years, which is, what does it take for us to get a product to market? How do we deal with requirements and system models and software, hardware, electrical hardware, and manufacture that and get it out through manufacturing so we can get it to customers. Now we see through IoT you can have this feedback loop, and there's the first existence of a digital twin that you could use in design or in manufacturing or in service, because you have the presence of the twins, meaning you have the digital definition twin and you have the physical experience twin, and you can combine those things in interesting ways to do things in engineering, manufacturing, or in service, as Nate had mentioned. In addition, many people see that you can, once you have this digital twin, you can start to do these very, very interesting things in service. Like Nate had mentioned, you can start to think about performance-based contracts a little bit more seriously. You can think about moving to products as a service a little bit more seriously, because you can really watch the performance of the equipment very, very closely in the field. You can, if you've designed in alerts for a service repair event lifecycle, you can then have the equipment signal you for that. And then ultimately, now you can cross the border again here and start to think about augmented reality service instructions, where you're going to not only have 3D service instructions that someone could look at through a 2D screen, but you can actually have a service technician actually look at service instructions in real 3D, meaning decorated on a 3D object in the field. And then finally, if you can't be co-located with the equipment, you can then bring the digital and physical data together in a virtual environment, whereby you can take the digital definition, combine with the physical experience data, put that together in a 3D mock-up, and display that in a virtual reality environment. And so for us, I mean, this is, let's say, a little bit of a summary of our holistic perspective on digital twin. We do think that they get used in design and manufacturing and service, like Nate said. We do think that they need to be fit for purpose for both companies and those applications. But our own, PTC's definition of digital twin is that those two things need to exist for them to be true. That is the digital definition combined with the physical experience.
So another really interesting theme that I've sort of watched evolve over the last few years within the PLM industry is around cloud. Now, obviously, in other enterprise application spaces, we've seen aggressive adoption of cloud technologies. Within PLM, that dynamic's been different. There's a lot of concern around IP and security, so companies have been a little bit more conservative about their adoption of cloud. Also, oftentimes for large discrete manufacturers, PLM is so business critical that type of migration might be sort of dangerous or risky, and then you run into regulation issues as well. But what I have seen over the last few years is a slow and steady move in the direction of at least experimentation with cloud and the use of single-tenant cloud. So you'll see here some data actually that just came out a few weeks back in late 2017, and that's around sort of adoption of cloud in the PLM market. So one thing that we're seeing is major interest in single-tenant cloud, where companies have private cloud implementations of a PLM. So that represents sort of a movement away from on-premise, towards sort of at least experimenting with cloud implementations. You'll see still 28% of the market. This is likely a lot of the sort of large enterprise discrete manufacturing market is still using on-premise for their PLM implementations. And then you'll also see in another sort of example of experimentation with cloud, you'll see hybrid, where companies are starting to maybe stick with their on-premise PLM implementation, but use maybe some cloud capabilities on top of that, some augmentative capabilities where the PLM isn't necessarily delivering value today. And then finally, the 14%, you'll see the emergence of multi-tenant cloud in PLM. And while that number isn't that high yet, I think it does represent a sort of shift that will continue to evolve over the next few years in the PLM market, where companies are more interested in using a multi-tenant SaaS capability, and especially for companies and verticals that didn't traditionally use PLM, or smaller companies, this is a really valuable opportunity to democratize product development a little bit. Now that we've looked at some of the adoption trends, I'm just going to talk about sort of, what's motivating some of these trends. So first of all, I think that, product organizations are finally starting to understand the value that PLM can drive. They're seeing it across the rest of the enterprise application space. Within digital transformations as a whole, SaaS is often really core to those digital transformations, so maybe there's pressure from the rest of the organization. And I think there's also less concern about security of the cloud. Even very large enterprises are realizing that the security of some of these cloud vendors is going to be stronger than theirs. I think there's also, like I mentioned in the last slide, cloud is sort of changing the dynamics of the product industries, where smaller users can create and design smaller companies rather, can create and design complex products and compete with much larger companies that have been in the market for a long time. From the vendor perspective, I think it's interesting and I think it's really vital that vendors push their customers or encourage their customers to move towards cloud in the PLM space. Now, part of that is actually just introducing full multi-tenant PLM capabilities to complement their on-premise capabilities, which not every vendor in the field necessarily has. But secondary to that, and I think the next step is sort of enabling customers to make that switch if that's what they wish to do. And that comes in the form of, decustomization offerings and migration services and even maybe pricing breaks around moving to cloud. And then finally, like I mentioned in the adoption slide, we are seeing this sort of slow movement. It goes industry by industry, company size by company size, but we are seeing a steady movement in the PLM space from, steadfast on-premise deployments to more openness to single-tenant cloud deployments, and then finally more openness to full SaaS multi-tenant deployments.
So let me just add to what Nate had said with really three things. One is what we're seeing kind of on an individual customer basis, and then a little bit about how we see the market moving, and then finally how we think about cloud at PTC. So, first of all, there's no question we're seeing increasing value that's being accrued by companies in adopting PLM, period. And so you see some statistics on the page here around improvement in revenue and margins and new product revenue in adopting of PLM themselves. So if you think about that, the other side of the PLM equation is implementation cost and agility. And so from our perspective, we're saying who better to implement PLM for our customers than us? Who better to manage it than us? Who better to help them, let's say, frictionlessly expand than us? And so what we're trying to do is enact a way for customers to be able to adopt PLM more cheaply, more flexibly, so that they can respond to an environment where they need to be agile themselves. And so we're trying to drive down the initial implementation costs. We're trying to drive down our customers' costs and ongoing support of an enterprise application. And then ultimately, because a lot of these things are centralized and we get a little bit of economies of scale, we can help by consuming less power and things like that by aggregating, let's say, IT assets in a centralized place. And so that's how we're kind of thinking about it from an individual customer perspective. What we're seeing in the market is, frankly, illustrated by the numbers you see on the slide. I won't recant them for you, but I will tell you that I would say probably 8 out of every 10 customers that I meet, the CIO or some senior person in IT has an initiative to get out of their data center into the cloud over the next 3 to 5 years. We've seen that reflected in our business. So from 2015 to 2016, our cloud business doubled. Last year, our cloud business increased by 45%. 7 out of 10 of our largest PLM deals last year were done in the cloud. And so it's happening now. We're starting to see the dam break on people being more secure that they can put PLM data, their product data, in the cloud, and it won't be at risk. And in the end, from a PTC perspective, the value proposition that we're bringing to our customers is about mainly agility I talked about before, but essentially if we're to summarize it when we talk to our customers, we like to say something along the lines of we should be and are better than you at implementing and managing a Windchill environment. Because we can achieve some economies of scale and centralize it, we can do it more cost effectively than our customers. And then finally, and maybe most importantly, we're paying attention to the security and scalability of the environments in which our customers end up in the PTC cloud.
Finally, the last theme that I wanted to touch on today that was really sort of driving value and of high importance to customers I talked to is around implementation capabilities, configuration capabilities, and integration capabilities. So as I talk to legacy PLM clients at Forrester, who maybe went through a PLM implementation a decade ago or several years ago, they often mention readily how painful that experience was. So when I went on this Wave research initiative, I thought it was really important to look at, how easy PLM implementations were becoming, how quickly they were delivering value, how much configuration you could do before you had to customize the hard codes that you get the PLM solution that you need while still being able to update. And then finally, the importance of integration and cross-pollination of data from different enterprise application systems. And so what I found was that vendors that performed well in the Wave had customers that were implementing in a matter of months. Obviously not the whole PLM system, but they were implementing bits and pieces and getting business value based on the specific needs of their organization quickly. I also found that they found the software easy to configure, whether that's through role-based applications or different options or modules or low-code application capabilities, so that they could get the needs that they wanted without having to customize the hard code of the software itself. And then when you need to upgrade 1 year down the road, that becomes much easier. I think that also reflects sort of an understanding from PLM vendors of what customers need today. And, touching on one more theme around customization, I think there's been sort of a shift in the culture around customization where both PLM vendors and really importantly PLM customers more and more understand that customization might not be the best path. That maybe it's better to shift their business processes a little bit to meet the sort of realities of the PLM implementation than to, do a bunch of hard code customization that's going to cost a lot of money and continue to cost you money down the road as you try to update the software. So that was sort of an interesting cultural dynamic, but I think it's important to look for from the PLM vendor you're working with, but also within your own organization. And then finally, the integration point I think is really important. I think it's foolish to expect discrete manufacturing customers to have a uniform suite of product development applications. What we see more and more is disparate tools that meet the needs of the specific customer, and I think PLM vendors need to prepare to have integration capabilities that allow customers to mesh the data they need to mesh regardless of what software vendor is providing that. And so customers who described really openness from their PLM vendor, those are the PLM vendors that tended to perform well in the Wave.
Yeah, Nate. So, we're seeing that cultural shift for certain, that even the largest customers who think they have, or not think, they do have processes that they really feel drive added benefit to creating their products that are winning in the market, are now shifting to an environment where they're no longer willing to customize their PLM implementation. And so from our standpoint, we've been in this business for quite a while. We have 9,200 customers. We have learned something about what are the core tenets of a good PLM implementation. And we now have that in a way where we have best practices-led implementations that start from, outcomes and process, lead to practices, ultimately lead into, configured systems that the customers can then roll out to their users and execute. And if they follow that kind of best practices path, everything gets easier. The initial implementation gets easier. Integrations with third-party systems get easier, and then ultimately upgrades and expansion get easier as well. And so many of our customers, even the largest ones in the most complicated environments, are starting to adopt this attitude. And we are changing our offerings, the application itself, plus service offerings, plus how we enable our partners to actually do implementations in that best practices fashion. And so for us, not to oversimplify it, we see, three key components. The first one is this idea of best practices approach to process and practices, in the engineering organization and the people that are around that. The second thing, because we won't be perfectly configured to the customer's existing process, they're going to need to change some things. And along with that, they're going to need to be able to adopt some new processes or practices at the end user level, at the management level, and at the operational level. And so we need to have change enablement services that can help our customers move from where they were to where they need to go. And then finally, this idea of being able to create a scalable and secure infrastructure, whether that be in our cloud, in the customer's private cloud, or in the environment that's hosted inside the IT organization of our customers, helping them and advising them on how they can have a secure and scalable infrastructure. And so we take those two things and we wrap it up into something we call value-ready deployments at PTC for different implementations of different portions of PLM, if you will. And those are predefined packages that are configurable, that our services organization and partners can guide our customers through, whether that be an on-premise or in the cloud deployment. And those are all focused on this idea of rapid implementation, rapid adoption, and then ease of upgrade and expansion as people move through their implementation journey over the years.
All right, now before we get to the Q&A section, I'm just going to hit some key takeaways I think that I took out of the Wave, all the really important discussions I had with customer references, and really what sort of sentiments I got from them, and how those translated into successful relationships with PLM vendors. So the first one was sort of collaboration between the PLM vendor and the customer base. So really, happy customers that were having successful, innovative PLM implementations often described their relationship with the PLM vendor as strategic. They felt that their sort of questions, comments, feedback was reflected in requirements. They felt that the vendor understood the dynamics of their specific industry and was investing in those spaces. They felt like they had the ear of, individuals from across the PLM vendor organization, including on the executive level. So I think one thing to look for is a sense that you really are working with a collaborative PLM vendor. Another really core theme, which we touched on with the implementation slides just a couple minutes ago, is around the ability to deliver business value quickly. So look for a PLM vendor who is interested in your specific needs, how your needs and your industry differ, and what aspects of the PLM need to be implemented first to get that business value moving, to get the implementation moving, and then from there you can incrementally improve that and add value on top, and add more innovative functionality on top over time. I think it's important to remember that there are sort of core discrete manufacturing needs that are really important within a PLM. So while there's a lot of interesting innovation happening in the PLM market, there's also core discrete manufacturing requirements that certain PLM vendors have a strong understanding of and can be delivered and have been delivered for years and years. So I think that while it's important to look at, and I'll touch on emerging technology in a second, it's also important to remember what your core needs are and what types of experiences the vendor has in delivering those needs. And then finally, the other side of that coin is you want to make sure that your vision of the market, your vision of your industry and how it's going to evolve over time aligns with your PLM vendor. If there's certain technologies that you're going to want to embrace that relate to product development down the road, I think you want to look for a vendor that shares that vision, that is investing in those technologies, that is adopting capabilities like cloud deployment and really bringing a large portion of their customer base to the cloud. I think those types of themes are really important. So those are just 4 key takeaways from this report, and now I think we'll hand it over to questions. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Nate and Kevin, for the informative presentation. We do have time for a few questions from the audience. If we don't get to your question, don't worry, we'll be sure to follow up with you after this webinar. Okay, so the first question we have for Nate. What do you believe is the most important criteria when looking for a PLM vendor?
So, I think that's a tough question because there's a lot of variability there based on the specific needs of each customer, based on the heritage of each customer, based on their industry, the software they already have implemented. So I think what's really important when customers start to embark on a PLM implementation or, vendor selection journey is understanding their business problems, interviewing their own internal stakeholders to understand what they need from the PLM, exploring how a PLM can build out value beyond how it's traditionally been viewed in the overall enterprise application ecosystem, and really sort of use those types of criteria, maybe use some design thinking within your own organization, and also how it's going to enable your customers. Those types of criteria, a little bit non-traditional, not necessarily something you're going to find right in the current offering, but more of a holistic view of the PLM and understanding, what vendor is really going to meet those needs based on the realities of your business.
Thank you. Next question. What was the ranking of each vendor?
So, Mark, this is a tough one. I don't think that you can really take a PLM Wave and give a hard and fast ranking, 1 through 7. What we created the Wave tools for was so that they could be customized. You can adjust the weightings of each criteria given the nature of your PLM implementation, like I just mentioned, given the realities of your business. So if you want to sort of weight something, a certain criteria more than another criteria, that's going to impact which vendor ranks where. So again, that's sort of an answer that depends on the realities of your organization.
Yes, thank you. So, Nate, you mentioned how important it is to deliver business value quickly. Do you or Kevin have examples of how to do this?
So for me, it's about being really careful with your implementation, taking it step by step. Like I mentioned already, sort of interviewing stakeholders within your organization, understanding how PLM has been used in the past, understanding how you want PLM to be used in the future, and implementing the features that are going to sort of enable that first and quickly, and then moving on from there. Kevin, I'm not sure if you have any sort of additional thoughts there.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you said. But just to add to that is that, prior to doing the interviewing and deciding which functionality you want to do first, you need to decide on, okay, great, what value are we going to drive here in the short term and the long term? And what we found is that the customers that are most successful are the ones that are more precise on, are we going after engineering efficiency here, or cost of poor quality, or cost of goods sold, or a little of each of those, and then flavoring the implementation to be, let's say, targeted at producing those metrics on the back end, let's say.
Thank you. Time for one more, I think. This one's for Nate. Do you have a recommendation for how to get started on a digital transformation?
So again, that's a very broad question, but I can sort of recount what I see at Forrester from a client question perspective and from a data perspective. So in looking at data around where digital transformations are catalyzed, often it's IT and marketing. But whether this is surprising or unsurprising, product development's up there in probably the top 5, I'd say, in terms of where digital transformation's catalyzed. I think one really important thing to remember about digital transformations is not necessarily a single software implementation. It's not hiring a certain new skill set or stakeholder to catalyze that transformation. It's very much a puzzle piece approach where you've got to change the tools, you've got to change the processes, you need to add new skill sets, you need to create new team dynamics, maybe shift the dynamics of your organization. And so all these different sort of factors, you need to work on company culture as well. Make sure that the culture is, open to this, is prepared for this. So, there might be change management details there as well. So I think it's really about not viewing digital transformation as one software implementation or one new team in the organization, but really sort of a step-by-step, holistic set of changes that your organization wants to meet to interact with their customers more effectively using software.
Great. Well, once again, I would like to thank our presenters for taking the time to join us today. Thank you to the participants for joining this webcast. We hope you found it informative. Please be sure to go to ptc.com/PLM to download the full Forrester Wave report authored by Nate Fleming. Hope you have a wonderful day.